Hi, my name is Michael Vinding, and I welcome you all on behalf of the Eastern District Historical Society and the Sacramento chapter of the Federal Bar Association to our panel discussion on the 50th anniversary of the United States District Court for the Eastern District of Sacramento. As tomorrow is Constitution Day, this event is perfectly timed. I ask that you all refrain from taking pictures during the event. It is an honor today to introduce Congresswoman Doris Matsui. Congresswoman Matsui has represented Sacramento and its surrounding areas for more than a decade. She serves on the House Energy and Commerce Committee, on the Subcommittee on Health, and the Subcommittee on Communications and Technology. She is a longtime friend of the Sacramento legal community, and this very courthouse bears her husband's name. She flew out to Sacramento from Washington, D.C. early in order to be here today, so I ask you to please welcome Congressman Doris Matsui.
Thank you so much. It's wonderful to see all of you here this afternoon. And thank you, Mike, for that kind introduction. And thank you all for the Eastern District Historical Society and the Sacramento chapter of the Federal Bar Association for hosting today's event and for inviting me to join in the celebration of this important milestone. It's hard to believe that 1966, the year the Eastern District was created by Congress, was actually a half century ago. You know, it's quite sobering to me because 1966 was a year that Bob Matsui graduated from law school, got married, and brought his young bride back to Sacramento, his hometown, to start his law practice. And I think you know who that bride was and is. Anyway, the town and the legal profession were quite a little bit different then, and so was this court. Most of the federal offices, including the judges, were on 650 Capitol Mall, which is now known as the John Moss Federal Building. This place was maybe a little bit nicer than that one, but still, you know, really wonderful things happened over there too. But I could never have imagined that I would be standing here today celebrating the 50th anniversary in the Robert T. Matsui Federal Courthouse. It is a privilege for all of us to have Justice Tony Kennedy here to mark this anniversary. Justice Kennedy represents the best and the traditions of our community and of public service. And he and Mary have been dear friends to my family and me for a very long time. I remember how proud Bob was to introduce him at a Senate confirmation for the Supreme Court of the United States. My son Brian had the honor to clerk for him in the Supreme Court after first proving himself as a clerk here in the Eastern District, clerking for Judge David Levy. I always have a wonderful time when I get together with the Justice and Mary in Washington, D.C., and here at home. He is still of Sacramento, and you all know that. I want to thank Judge Shub, the district senior judge emeritus, for his leadership and participation here today. There are many distinguished guests here amongst us, and it would be take far too long for me to introduce them all. Sacramento's legal community is well represented here, including those from the U.S. Attorney's Office, the state court judges, public defenders, and those in the private practice of the law. Thank you, all of you, for coming here today. And I do want to, though, recognize the sitting federal judges here who work tirelessly on behalf of justice for the people of California. Judge Callahan from the Ninth Circuit, Judge Burrell, Judge Draws, Judge England, Judge Ishii, Judge Mendez, and Judge Nunley. Thank you all for your dedicated service. In addition, this district really does depend on the magistrate judges and the bankruptcy judges to keep up the heavy docket, and I want to thank them very much for their service, and the judicial officers here today. Before we hear from Justice Kennedy and Judge Shub, I have a short presentation here to make. So may I ask Judge Morrison England, my good friend and Chief Judge Emeritus of Court, to accept a few items here. Where are you?
I'm here.
Judge England, here, I have, now let's do it this way first.
Okay.
I have here a congressional record statement celebrating today's, or tomorrow's, what is it, 50th anniversary of the Eastern Circuit. And I also have a flag here flown over and I didn't fly it myself personally, but I had it flown over the United States Capitol in honor of the 50th anniversary. So if you please accept these items.
Absolutely. Thank you so very much.
Thank you very much. I
kind of you.
appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Very generous of you, Congresswoman Matsui. Thank you so very much. I have another flag that was also flown over the Capitol, and this was from Congressman Kevin McCarthy, and he was not able to make it here, but he did send some words he'd like to be read here as I accept this flag. And that is, the flag was flown over the U.S. Capitol to honor the 50th anniversary of the Eastern District of California. And given that Congressman McCarthy's district includes portions of Kern, Tulare, and Los Angeles counties, and largely falls within the Eastern District of California, the Congressman presents this flag in honor of the hard work and dedication of those who help to ensure the Eastern District of California in a fair, independent, and dedicated way for the advancement of justice. And again, I accept that, Congressman McCarthy, and also from Congresswoman Matsui. I am here today on behalf of the current Chief Judge O'Neill, who was not able to make it, and he and I spoke about this, and the decision was made that because of the close ties the Matsui family has to not only this community and courthouse, this flag and display will be kept in Sacramento, and the one from Congressman McCarthy will go to Fresno. So we'll have both courthouses fully represented congressionally. So again, thank you so very much for doing this. Thank you.
Thank you both. I would now like to introduce today's moderator, Breanne Mobius. Bree served as the senior law clerk for Judge Shub since 2007. She's also taught civil rights at the University of Pacific McGeorge and UC Davis Law School. She's the past president of the Sacramento chapter of the Federal Bar Association in 2004. And with her help and guidance, I promise that today's event will be memorable. Bree?
Thank you, Mike. From 1850 through 1966, the state of California was organized into two federal judicial districts, the Northern District and the Southern District. That changed on March 18, 1966, when Congress enacted Public Law 89-372 to create the Eastern District of California. 6 months later, on September 18, 1966, the Eastern District opened its doors for the first time at 650 Capitol Mall. On that day, the Eastern District had 3 district judges, 3 assistant United States attorneys, and no federal defender. Today, the Eastern District has 9 district judges, 15 magistrate judges, 92 assistant United States attorneys, and 32 assistant federal defenders. Of course, though, the growth and history of our district cannot be captured in mere numbers. We are fortunate to have 2 esteemed jurists with us today who were practicing in Sacramento when the district was created. They are here to share their more personal memories and recollections about the history of our district and the judges and lawyers who left indelible marks. Supreme Court Justice Anthony M. Kennedy has strong ties to Sacramento and our district. He was born in Sacramento and he grew up in Lamb Park. In 1963, he took over his father's law practice here and continued in private practice for 12 years. After he was appointed to the Ninth Circuit in 1975, he maintained his chambers here for 13 years across the street from the federal courthouse at that time. He also taught constitutional law at University of the Pacific McGeorge School of Law and has maintained his affiliation with McGeorge to this day. Senior District Judge William B. Shub was born in Oakland, and after graduating law school in 1963, he moved here to serve as a law clerk for District Judge Cheryl Halbert. After his clerkship, Judge Shub served as an assistant United States attorney from 1965 to 1974. Then he went into private practice. He returned to the United States Attorney's Office to serve as the United States Attorney from 1980 to 1981, and then again went to private practice. In 1990, he was appointed to the United States District Court for the Eastern District of California. He served as our court's chief judge from 1996 to 2003. Judge Shub has appeared before or been a colleague with every judge and magistrate judge who has served in the history of our district. When Sacramento was still a part of the Northern District, Judge Martin I. Welsh was the first judge appointed to reside and sit in Sacramento. 8 years later, in 1947, Judge Dal M. Lemon was appointed to succeed him. Justice Kennedy, you knew both of those judges. What was your recollection at the time about the circumstances that gave rise to the creation of the Eastern District?
Well, thank you, and good afternoon. Relax. No one knows what's going to happen here, so it's okay. It might be stretching a point too much to say for me to assert a personal recollection of Judge Welsh, but I know my parents both knew him. He was the mayor of Sacramento. He'd been a United States. He'd been a Superior Court judge. Rolfe had appointed him, and my father came to Sacramento as Governor Rolfe's appointment secretary. And they knew him, and they spoke very highly of him. Dal Lemon, our family did know, and it was my honor to know the judge. Even today, I think attorneys may be somewhat reluctant to have judicial officers over to their homes for social occasion. There's that independence and that separation we have. In an earlier time, we might talk about what Sacramento was like in an earlier time. This was a rigid rule, and though my parents knew the Lemons very well, and Mary Alice Lemon was just a delightful, beautiful lady. They would see them at other events and so forth, and the Lemons would come often to see our neighbors right across the street, and we would chat with them. But my father was very, very careful on not having a social relation. Judge Lemon sat in the federal district courthouse, which is what I call the post office building at 8th and I. And I drove by today, and it said "Space for Lease." I don't quite understand that. But it was a simply beautiful courthouse. And in my high school days, when my father was practicing, and I was a solo practitioner, was lonely, so I always followed him around. I was in Judge Lemon's courtroom just as a spectator, as a visitor, many different times. It was an absolutely beautiful courtwood. He was a distinguished, very learned judge. He later kind of went to the Ninth Circuit. And would be the first Sacramento judge who'd gone to the Ninth Circuit. He was just a very, very scholarly man. I think he came here as the state law librarian. Graduated from Stanford, couldn't get a job, but was recognized as a preeminent judge and a distinguished man, and had this beautiful courtroom. Do they still use it? Bill,
it's now, I think, part of the Federal Defender's Office.
Well, they say space for lease if anybody wants it. So I knew Lemon very, very, very well as a young boy can know a distinguished elder person in that sense.
Judge Shub, they were sitting in the Northern District and weren't a part, didn't have its own courthouse in Sacramento. What was happening to lead to the Eastern District being created?
Well, over the years since, I've heard credit given to a lot of different individuals for the creation of the Eastern and Southern Districts out of what used to be the old Southern District and Northern District of California. And I think probably the fact of the matter is that it was something that had to happen. You know, California started in San Francisco. The Southern District was almost an afterthought. And then it grew. And when you think about it, in 1966, The Southern District of California included what's now the entire Central District of California, what is now the new Southern District of California, San Diego, and part of what is now the Eastern District of California, Fresno. And I just imagine that that became so cumbersome to manage as a unit that something had to happen.
It was way too big, even then. And you have to remember, district courts as we know them were not established until 1911. I see, Judge Walsh, probably appointed here in the late 30s. So the district judges, or district courts as we know them, were less than 40 years old when Walsh was appointed. Mm-hmm. And the needs of the district courts were not understood. But California, my heaven, this district today, 34 counties. The population of this district, it makes it the 8th biggest district in the country. If this Eastern District of California were a state, it would be the 12th largest state in the United States, both by size and roughly by population. I mean, that's how big you are. People see the big federal courthouses in Fresno and California and in Sacramento. You have to realize how vast the region is you represent and how many cases you had. So this was just something people were slow to understand. Have you heard that there was some resistance on? Federal officials do not like their jurisdiction reduced. So when people would talk about in the Northern District, I'm not sure the Northern District judges were particularly happy with this. On the other hand, they must have realized that they didn't have time to go to. I just never heard much about whether there was some resistance by the part of the Northern District judges who lived in San Francisco. I just don't know that.
There may have been some resistance in San Francisco. In Sacramento, it was the other side of the coin.
Of course.
You couldn't divide the southern part of the state without taking the northern part into account. And so if you were going to take that Fresno part of the Southern District away from it, you had to put it somewhere, and they created the Eastern District of California out of what used to be the Northern Division of the Northern District and the Northern Division of the Southern District. And I imagine some of the judges in San Francisco felt they were losing something that they didn't need to lose. But the judges in Sacramento, from the time I came to work for Judge Halbert in 1963, were constantly making little snide remarks. We're second-class citizens here.
Right.
The U.S. Attorney, there was only one assistant U.S. Attorney in Sacramento. He worked for the United States Attorney in San Francisco. He'd say, I have to get permission from San Francisco. And the judges here would say, we're second-class citizens. And so the move was underway from the time I came in 1963. Ultimately, it happened in 1966. I was in the U.S. Attorney's office at that time, and we heard that there was going to be a new Eastern District of California. We started to wonder whether we were going to have jobs. We were working for the Northern District of California. We were in Sacramento. There was going to be a new U.S. Attorney appointed for the Eastern District of California. Would he hire his own assistants? It was very soon that we learned that the bill also said that all assistant United States attorneys presently in Sacramento would become assistant United States attorneys for the Eastern District of California. So we took some comfort in that. And from March of 66 until September 66, when it was to take effect, it was an exciting period of time. One of our assistants, Roth Mason, wanted to be the United States Attorney for the Eastern District of California. He went around to lobby the congressman in the district. And he went down to Bakersfield and he said, Congressman, I'd like to be the United States Attorney for the new Eastern District of California. And the congressman said, what is that, United States Attorney? So he explained it to him. And the congressman said, you know, I think that'd be a good job for my friend John Hyland. And sure enough, John Hyland became the first United States Attorney.
Was Roth Mason a clerk for Cheryl Howard?
No, he was not. He was
he was a brilliant.
He was. Attorney. He later on became a Superior Court judge, and he was one of the three assistants that we had in the office when the district was created. Same thing with the Marshal Service. The Marshals would say, well, we need some more help up here. We've got to apply to San Francisco where the U.S. Marshal is, and the judges would say, yes, we're just second-class citizens. So we got a new marshal here, and his name was John Begovich. He was a state senator from Amador County, Jackson. He was a war hero. And I remember wondering, what effect this was going to have on our district. But
he should have been appointed in the time of Stephen Field. He wore a huge cowboy hat and visible pistols,
Yeah.
matching visible. Visible pistols, and he lived in Jackson and would commute. And one time, someone phoned him and they said, we have a state senator here. He's being taken. We're being tested for drunk driving. I said, where should we take him? He said, take him home. No, John, and I would always have liked to seen the interaction between Halbert and Begovich, but Cheryl Halbert, I had not realized until I was talking to Bill a couple of days ago that Bill was his clerk. Was a good friend of our family. He and my mother worked together on the Pony Express project, and people used to say, "Are you representing your mother on the Pony Express project?" I said, "No, Halbert's doing that." He loves civic activity. Had a prosecutor's background, very severe sentencing, and some of the few appearances I had in the district court were to move for a reduction of sentence, and I would wait till around Christmas time. Those days you could revise it after 6 months. After 6 months, you could change the sentence.
There was a provision to do that.
Right. But Halbert was a very, very, very fine district judge, and I knew him well. I did not go often to district court. I went mostly in my first part of my practice to what was then the Northern District in San Francisco. I was in San Francisco, and I did admiralty work. And I had a case, it was a small enough case they could give it to me, where it was being tried before Judge Al Wallenberg, a distinguished, dignified, very quiet, scholarly man. And he had his presence on the bench just had the jurors and the audience in awe. And I was representing a barge owner, and barges have what's called a capstan. It looks like a chess pawn in its shape, and it has slots in it so that you can take a crowbar and go around and pull up an anchor chain or a rope. And I represented the barge owner, and this capstan, the gear broke, and the rope came around, and it hit the seaman, and there was an injury. It had a fracture in his jaw. And so we thought we settled the case, and I phoned Judge Wallenberg. I said, "Judge, we've settled this case. We won't have to try it on Friday." And then the settlement documents came, and the plaintiff's admiralty attorney had moved the decimal one place to the right. So I told Judge Wallenberg, I phoned him, I said, I'm sorry, Your Honor, but this case has not settled. He said, I was going to pick a jury in another case. I'm going to pick juries in 2 cases. You come there with all of your, with both counsel, and you bring your pretrial statement of what the case is about. And the audience was full. There was 2 juries to be full, lots of attorneys for law and motion. And he picks up this paper, and this quiet, dignified man starts roaring with laughter. Tears are coming out of it. And he's reading my pretrial statement. And this caption's like a winch. And I looked at it and said, "This case began when a winch that a seaman was working on unwound and struck him in the jaw." And which was my first and very public lesson in proofreading. You have to do your own. But the judges in San Francisco were very close. Sam Conti and some of the other great judges there, and they would see me and say, "You got any of those wench cases for us again?" And years later, Phil Wilkins, who had a great sense of humor, heard that story, and so he had to start the story all over again 10 years later.
Well, I don't have a great follow for that story, but if we go back to the first day when the doors opened, and we had 3 judges, Judge Halbert, which Justice Kennedy talked about. We also had Judge Thomas J. McBride and Judge Myron D. Crocker. And Judge Halbert had told McBride before he was a judge that being a district judge in Sacramento was the best judicial job possible. Judge McBride later reflected that after he joined the bench, he agreed. Judge Crocker had said that becoming a judge added 10 years to his life because instead of getting ulcers, he was now giving ulcers. Justice Kennedy, you told us a little bit about Judge Halbert. What would you like to share about Judge McBride and Judge Crocker?
Judge McBride and his wife Martha were very good friends of our parents, and simply wonderful people. And McBride had this tremendous sense of humor. When I came to the Court of Appeals, you're correct. The best job in the world is a district judge. There's nothing you can do with those judges. They have their own realm, their own kingdom, and it's a wonder. You get to see real people. You have juries, and so I wanted to be district judge. That couldn't have. So I went to the Court of Appeals. But I thought, well, I get my assignment, and I'll go down and I'll show everybody that I'm this really talented district judge. Well, Warren Berger would not allow us to go to be assigned to a district court because we had a 4,000 case backlog, only 12 circuit judges, 22% of the nation's business. We had visiting judges coming to us all the time, and so he would not allow us to be assigned to the district court. The one time I was sat on the district court was for my swearing in as a circuit judge. And we had Judge McBride, who was presiding, and Judge Wilkins, a wonderful man, we can talk about him later, one of our, also a great family friend, and Judge Halbert and myself. So 4 of us were on the bench. And it was in the afternoon, and there was going to be a big reception afterwards, and my family, of course, was there. And some of the lawyers who'd helped me spoke to wish me well, and spoke to wish me well. And then Judge Halbert administered the oath, and then it's the custom for the new judge, then having taken the oath, to thank everybody and to thank the President of the United States for the appointment, and to assure the bench and bar that he or she will be devoted and assiduous in his or her judicial work. And so McBride then thanked everybody. I've been sworn in. He said, and now, he said, well, we'll recess for our reception. And I said, Judge McBride, I said, I have to speak. And he said, McBride had a wonderful sense of humor and was a very charismatic presiding officer. And he said, holy moly, I forgot the judge. And I said, I've been sworn in for 90 seconds and I reversed you already. And McBride. So that was the one time I said, well, we had 3 judge district courts. We can talk about that, where a circuit judge has to be. But McBride was a dynamic, wonderful personality, and presided over a lively courtroom, which was where there was humor and very good argument, but ran a very, very good court. Had great respect as a presiding judge.
Judge Shub, you clerked for Judge Halbert for 2 years, and I can attest that law clerks get to see a unique side of judges. What would you like to share about him?
We see the good side of the judges.
I agree.
Judge Halbert was my mentor. Think about it. He was born in 1901 on a sheep farm in Tulare County that his family homesteaded in 1880. And his father remembered Abraham Lincoln. He'd tell him stories about Lincoln. That accounts in part for how Judge Halbert became a Lincoln scholar later on. He used to have all these books on Lincoln in his chambers. And I thought that was the entire collection, and I was impressed even with that.
Oh, I forgot about
Later, after he retired, he gave his entire Lincoln collection to McGeorge, and we worked out an arrangement with McGeorge to have it housed here. And they brought it over here. It's now down in the Anthony M. Kennedy Learning Center, where we're going afterwards, and you can see the collection. It was one of the most complete collections at its time on the West Coast. He was a Lincoln Scholar. But he had the country. He still had the country in him. He was a Californian, but he was a rural Californian. And he had these folksy statements. I see Dick Nichols grinning there a little bit. When he wanted to keep the lawyers going, he'd say, "You got to keep them up to the keep them up to the snubbing post." When he wanted to get them to do something, he'd say, "They got to fish or cut bait." Later on, he changed that to fish, cut bait, or go ashore. He had all these sayings. Anything with more moving parts than a crowbar is bound to break down. I love that one. I use it all the time in trials. He was my mentor. Judge McBride, Justice Kennedy is right. He had a lot of class, but he was frugal. And I do have one story to tell about him, and that was one time we were in chambers and we had a juvenile proceeding, and it ended up that he had to sign a certain order. I was representing the government, somebody else was representing the juvenile, and he said, "I'll sign the order. Mr. Shub, would you present the order to me?" And I did, and he looked at it and signed it and excused everybody. He said, "Mr. Shub, would you please remain?" I said, "Yes." So I stayed in there. He said, "Bill," everybody's gone. He said, "Bill, I signed that order." He said, but that's a terrible form. He said, I said, "Well, Judge," I said, "that's the same form we use in every other case. That's a form order." He says, "Well, you can bet me I never signed that form." I said, "How much?" You shouldn't say that to the judge. No. It just came out. Now, McBride thinks a minute. He says, $1. So I said, "Just a minute." In those days, we didn't have anything electronic. I had to run down to my office, which is down at the end of the hall. I went into the filing cabinet. I found some orders. I opened it. Sure enough, there was one exactly the same as I had just presented to him with Thomas J. McBride, signature at the bottom. So I run back, and I present it to him. He's all right. So he was walking over to his little coat rack over there where he had his robe and his coat hang. He pulls his wallet out of his pocket, opens it up, it's unfolded. He pulls out a crisp new $1 bill. He must have just got it from the bank. He gives it to me and he goes like this and he says, "Spend it wisely, son. You're not going to get another one like that again."
When Judge McBride was appointed, probably when Judge, yes, when McBride was appointed, Halbert was in the old office building, the old courthouse, and so they had to have a second courtroom, and they manufactured one. And Nat Colley, a marvelous litigator, came to, I think, visit Judge McBride and to congratulate him. And he looked at the courtroom. He said, "This will never do." And McBride said, "Well, yeah, don't worry about it." He said, "Why am I worried about it?" He said, "When you go to federal court, you have a big courtroom and you can charge your clients a lot more." He said, "I can't do this in this thinking." And so that maybe might bring you to the new courthouse on 650 Capitol Mall.
Did you want to add before we?
Judge Wilkins?
Well, that's where I was going to go. So Judge Wilkins in 1970 joined the court, and Justice Kennedy, you mentioned you had something you would like to share about him.
Phil Wilkins was a very good friend of our family and of mine. Again, an age difference, and we used to see each other a lot at the Capitol when the Senate was in session, and we both had the same style. We didn't wait around to see legislators much. We gave it the lawyers, gave lobbying kind of a lawyer's approach, where we'd make appointments and so forth. But Phil had a wonderful sense of humor. He loved baseball, and would go every year to the World Series with Earl Warren. He was a very, very close friend of Earl Warren, and his wife Sue, an elegant, lovely lady. And I don't think I appeared before Judge Wilkins as a judge. One of the cases I had in the new Eastern District was the Donna Ridge fire case, but they had John Kilkenny come to try that from Portland. Or I guess that was when there was the old Northern District. I don't think I ever appeared in front of Judge Wilkins. We would sometimes have Judge Callahan visiting district judges come to sit on the Court of Appeals, but McBride and Wilkins never sat with me. I'd always hoped that they would. Dean Price and Crocker sat with me, but Wilkins had a marvelous sense of humor and was one of the most well-respected attorneys in Sacramento. Had a very fine reputation and deservedly so as an attorney.
He did go to the World Series. One year when the A's were going to go to the World Series, I wanted to go. And so I had approached to Judge Wilkins, and I said, Judge, I understand you're going to the World Series. He said, oh, yes. I said, I'd like to go too. I said, could you make sure we don't set any cases during that week, that period of time when the World Series is going to be in Oakland? He said, oh, yeah. So he told his clerk. Well, one day, a few weeks later, I was in his court, and I had a case. The defendant enters a plea of not guilty. Do you wish to have this matter set for jury trial? Yes. Very well, Mr. Clerk. Set it down for trial. He says, October the 10th. And I looked up at the judge, and he's just looking down like this. Wilkins, he looked over his glasses like this, and I said, Your Honor, yes. I said, that's the week we're going to be in the Bay Area. He says, oh, the conference. From then on, whenever I was going to a ball game in the Bay Area, I said I was going to a conference. And he did have a great sense of humor. But the first day that he sat on the bench, I was in the U.S. Attorney's Office, and he had a calendar. He had a routine criminal calendar. And he called me into his chambers, and he said, what's going to happen this morning? And I said, well, this is number one. He's going to ask to have it continued. This is number two. He's going to plead not guilty, and your clerk will set it for jury trial, and there may be a couple other things on there. And we went over them in detail. So we went into court, and sure enough, it just went as planned. One at a time, those cases were resolved, and the lawyers, after they finished their case, would walk out of the courtroom until there was nobody left in the courtroom but me, the judge, and his clerk. And he said, Bill, and I approached the bench, and he said, we did it. That was so great. And just one other story about his sense of humor. Dick Walker, who was a federal defender, I hope we're going to talk about him here in a few minutes, had a motion on a motion to suppress, and he had his investigator, Dave Kraft, testifying on the motion. And he was trying to draw a diagram over here on an easel, and he had a little piece of chalk, and he was trying to draw, and the chalk kept breaking. And Judge Wilkins finally looks down at Dick Walker, and he says, can't you give him a bigger piece of chalk? And Walker says, I'm sorry, Your Honor. He says, we don't let him have anything sharp in the office. Wilkins immediately says, I didn't know you had anything sharp in your office. Dick Walker and Phil Wilkins were very good friends.
But the courthouse, I guess the new courthouse was opened around 1961, was
62, I think.
61 or 62.
62.
And Judge Halbert went over to look at it, and I for years, the country had gone along with, because of World War II, with courthouse products dating, from the pre-40s in the 1930s. Moved to California, as you know. Northern California has these beautiful Victorian courthouses, simply splendid. And so I don't think the judge paid much attention to the plans for this courthouse, and the GSA wasn't really expertise in building them. This building, the Moss building, you can see the identical counterpart in Florida, and they each originally had a big snow roof. Well, you don't need a snow roof in Florida or Sacramento, but that's what they had. And so they took that off to save some money, giving it a very flat look. But in any event, Bill would remember if the door was open, you would see the prisoner on the commode. The judge had to put on his robe and walk into the public hallway before he got to the judge's entrance to the bench. Courtrooms are hard. You have to have an entrance for the judge, and for the spectators, entrance for the jury, entrance for the prisoner in custody, which is simple if you have one courtroom. But try it with 10 or 20. It's tough. And they had just not made the right accommodation. Did Halbert refuse to move into the courtroom?
Yes, Dick Nichols is here. He was his law clerk at the time. Yes, he wouldn't move in until they fixed so he couldn't see the commode, and they put another door on the side so he could come in. He still couldn't come in from his chambers, but he didn't have to walk in through that door back there.
And that may have got me interested in courthouse design later, because I got interested in courthouse design and worked with the GSA. And what were we talking about the doors? Oh,
Well,
She'll ask the next question.
okay.
well, before, just so we can include the judges who aren't with us today anymore, in 1978, Congress doubled the number of district judges on our district. And shortly after that, President Jimmy Carter appointed Judge Lawrence K. Carlton,
Right.
Judge Milton L. Schwartz, Judge Edward Dean Price, and Judge Raul A. Ramirez. Would you like to share some memories about those judges?
Milt Schwartz, mother owned Milt Schwartz's mother owned Levinson's bookstore. It was Selma Levinson owned Levinson's bookstore, and he was a very scholarly man. Our parents knew him very well, and he was with McDonough, Allen, Hoftig, and Schwartz, and they were very fine, very careful lawyers. When I was on the Court of Appeals, I would sometimes take the Greyhound bus at 6 a.m. to go to San Francisco, and occasionally I would see Milt there, and he would be working at 6 a.m. on his briefs. He was very, very, very diligent, and a meticulous lawyer, and that the McDonough firm was known for that. Turned out very, very good work product, and he was very, very careful, I'm sure, as a district judge. I'm trying to think. You see, I appeared mostly when I was in practice in the Superior Court, and of course he came to the bench after that. I was a circuit judge when he was appointed a district judge, but we thought it was a great tribute to him and to the bar that he would come to the federal bench.
I think the addition of those new judges to the court, more than anything to do with their individual personalities or attributes, was that it actually doubled the number of judges both in Sacramento and in Fresno. And it really, I think, changed the dynamics from that small court with 2 active judges up here, just one all by himself down in Fresno, to something more traditional. And from then on, it hasn't been exactly the same, but we haven't gotten any more judges since then, I'll say
I know,
that.
and I don't want to interrupt that systemic point, but the relation we had with the judges in Fresno that you've had. But one thing about Milt Schwartz, the Congress was slow. They were the Senate for the confirmation, so he was in private practice. He had cases, and he's nominated, and nothing's happening, and they'd say, "You have a tentative date. You have a tentative date." And so they phoned and they said, "You have a tentative date?" He said, "No, I don't." He said, "What do you mean?" They said, "Either you give me a date or you can take my name off the list." And they were so shocked in Washington that they gave him a hearing and confirmed him.
And Justice Kennedy, Judge Schwartz credits you with him applying or putting his name in to be a judge. He said you were in the elevator one day and you mentioned it to him, and before that he didn't know what a district judge did or know that there was an opening. Do you remember that day?
Well, I think he knew what a district judge did. Milt Schwartz was quite a litigator. But people have told me that story, and apparently I do remember telling Milt that he ought to go to the federal bench because I thought he was such a fine lawyer, and I think maybe that's how he found out about the vacancy.
With the exception of Judge Robert E. Coyle, all of the other judges appointed to this district are with us today, so we've made the judicious decision not to discuss them in their presence today. With magistrate judges, our court today has 15 magistrate judges. But Judge Shub, how has the role of the magistrate judges in this district changed over time?
Well, historically, and up to the time that I came to work for the court for Judge Halbert, we had what they called U.S. commissioners. They weren't lawyers. They didn't have to be lawyers. And they would be stationed at various points in the district, at Yosemite, the national parks, the metropolitan areas, the outlying areas, so that they could arraign people in criminal cases and handle those types of non-dispositive issues. It wasn't until after I came to work for Judge Halbert, and actually after I was in the U.S. Attorney's Office, that the role of the commissioners changed. And we had the Magistrates Act in 1968 that changed all that. Then you had to be a lawyer, and the title was changed from commissioner to magistrate. So before we had the Magistrates Act, our commissioner in Sacramento was Gary Shaber. He was Gordon Shaber, the dean at McGeorge and Judge's brother.
And not a lawyer.
Not a lawyer. He was the business manager of McGeorge, and he was our U.S. commissioner. So after the Magistrates Act, 1968, the whole thing changed. He had to leave, and we had to have a lawyer appointed. So the first magistrate that we had in Sacramento was Esther Mix.
Oh, she was wonderful.
Esther Mix. And she was Judge Wilkins's partner in his law practice before he was appointed to the court.
Wilkins and Mix.
Yes, Wilkins and Mix. Wilkins, Little, and Mix. Actually.
Wilkins, Little. And although my practice didn't take me very much to federal court, a few cases, we would go to the magistrates often because during hunting season, people would phone you that they've allegedly shot too many ducks, and we would go to the federal magistrate. John Moulds, I grew up with down the street, and he was a very fine federal magistrate. And these are the kind of things that circuit judges and appellate judges don't know much about, is how difficult it is to manage district courts. You have to be good business managers. On the Court of Appeals, you have the blue brief, the red brief, the yellow brief. Big deal. But the district judges are so much busier. And there was a magistrate. You mentioned Yosemite. Yosemite, with over 1 million visitors a year, its magistrate is like a very busy municipal court judge in a small city. And one time when I was on the Court of Appeals here in Sacramento, I received a call late at night from the Deputy Attorney General of the United States and the Deputy Secretary of State of the United States in Washington. And they said, "Judge Kennedy, we have a problem in Yosemite." I said, "Oh." And they said, "There's a magistrate there." I said, "Magistrate Pitts?" He said, "Yes." He said, he's committed the French ambassador to jail." And so I started to wake up, and it turned out that the French ambassador of the United States had been at the Ahwahnee Hotel, and he was thrilled to be there, but had to leave. And they have young college kids working at the Yosemite, and they set up from the bell desk of young lady to carry his bags, and carrying the bag down. He said, "I've had such a wonderful time here, my dear," and he kissed her on the cheek, and she filed charges against him, and Pitts put him in jail. So I told Magistrate Pitts, I said, I said, "Are you in your pajamas?" And he said, "Yes, I did." "Don't take them off. Go down and get him out of jail."
In addition, do you want to add to that?
No.
In addition to the magistrate judges, our court has bankruptcy judges, but our district was formed before the Bankruptcy Reform Act of 1978, providing for those judges. Judge Shub, how was bankruptcy handled then?
Well, before the Bankruptcy Reform Act, we had what we called referees in bankruptcy. They were appointed by the district court. And so Judge McBride and Judge Halbert had an agreement between the two of them that they would alternate appointments. When there'd be a United States commissioner up for appointment, the next one of them that had the appointment would make that appointment. And then if the next one was a bankruptcy referee, the other judge would make that appointment. So it fell upon Judge Halbert to appoint a bankruptcy referee, and he appointed Bob Woodward. Bob Woodward, when I came to work for Judge Halbert, was the only assistant United States attorney in Sacramento. And he was in court almost every day. He was almost in trial every day. And he wore the same black suit
Right.
during his arguments. And he had this tattered copy of Title 18 in his hand. And we called him, Brian Flynn, the crier, and I, the law clerk, called Bob Woodward the preacher. Sometimes we called him the hangman because he always got convictions. And he worked very well in Judge Halbert's court. Judge Halbert respected Bob, and so when that appointment came up, he appointed Bob Woodward as the referee in bankruptcy. I personally thought that was kind of strange because Bob Woodward seemed to be a criminal law practitioner. His experience seems to be in criminal law, but it just fit. He had always had an interest in bankruptcy, and he took that job on. He became a very good bankruptcy referee, and when the Bankruptcy Reform Act was passed, he was grandfathered in and became one of the first bankruptcy judges in our district. And then from then on, we've had
But
more.
when the act was originally passed, the judges were appointed by the Justice Department with the input of United States senators, and the judges were upset that this appointment function had been taken away. So then the act was soon amended so that now the circuit conference appoints judges, and when that changed and they added bankruptcy judges, I think suddenly the circuit conference was faced with having to, I'll make it up, appoint within a year or so 20 bankruptcy judges. So we had committees for around the circuit, and I served on this committee for the Eastern District with Phil Wilkins, and we had a bankruptcy law professor to help us, and we found out that the quality of the people that would apply to the appointment when it was being made by the judicial conference or by the court was really very, very fine attorneys. They might not have wanted to go through the political process where you go through the Senate and all that stuff. But we had wonderful bankruptcy judges. As a result, bankruptcy judges have to know so much law. They have to know all state commercial and property law and banking law. They have to know all the federal law. They have to know all the bankruptcy code. And they're very, very hardworking, and we're just extremely fortunate that we have such talented members of the bankruptcy bench.
Something else that the Bankruptcy Reform Act did was to create a bankruptcy court as a unit of the district court. Before that, there wasn't a bankruptcy court per se. And before that, the bankruptcy filings were just made in the district court clerk's office, and there was one deputy clerk, and he was in charge of all the bankruptcy filings. And there was a little paper sign off to the side of the counter that said bankruptcy. That's all it was. And it was Ted Adams. Ted Adams. And somebody come in and say, I want to file something in bankruptcy. Oh, Ted, come on over here. And Ted Adams would file it. That's the way it was before the Reform Act.
I had one bankruptcy case in which a Sacramento client here was having difficulty. The allegation was, at least, that there had been failure to withhold. That's the way some businessmen in trouble try to get additional cash, is failure to pay the IRS the money that's due for withholding. And they were creditors from around the country were converging here to put my client in bankruptcy. And my client said, all I need is 48 hours. And the revenue service was about ready to close down the bank accounts. So I went into district court here with a proposed order to enjoin the Internal Revenue Service from collecting a tax, which is a little difficult because there is a statute which says a federal court cannot enjoin revenue service. But I thought, well, I might have an argument when I'm preserving the jurisdiction of the bankruptcy court. And the clerk of this court said, no, you have to go to Los Angeles because that's where the bank is. So I go to Los Angeles, and we had a district judge there by the name of Charlie Carr. I don't know if any of you remember him. And he had his own style. He wore cowboy boots on the bench, and if he were bored, he'd lean back and he'd put his feet up on the bench and see his cowboy boots. And and he was very hard on attorneys. And I thought, he is going to hold me in contempt for even asking that I do this. It's just such a strange argument. But I made it very clear what the statute was, and I said, Your Honor, I said, we understand that this is a very unusual motion, but we do think that there is an exceptional case and wish you would consider it, and I am pleased to rest on my written submission. He said, okay, well, do you have anything to say? And he looked at the Assistant United States Attorney, and he said, nothing, Your Honor, except you can't do that. He said, what? And he said, I want this on the record, the court reporter. What am I holding in my hand? He said, it appears to be a pen. He said, what am I holding this? It appears to be Mr. Kennedy's proposed order. He said, what am I doing right now? I think it took the Ninth Circuit a full 72 hours to set the thing aside, but in the meantime, we had the injunction.
We talked a little bit about the prior courthouse at 650 Capitol Mall, and I understand there were some interesting doors there in the United States Attorney's Office. What can you tell us about those?
One of the things that attracted my interest on the Ninth Circuit was courthouse design, and many hours, months were spent on the design of the federal courthouse in Pasadena. I don't know if any of you have seen it, United States Court of Appeals building in Pasadena. And I was interested in this new San Jose courthouse. And I'd been working with the GSA, and I got a call from the United States Attorney, and he said, Judge Kennedy, he said, I hear you work a lot with the GSA, know the GSA people. He said, I have this problem here in the U.S. Attorney's Office. We have these glass doors, and the public defender can see who's coming in to see us all the time. And we've asked for different doors. And I said, that's not a problem at all. I'll do it. So I phoned the regional administrator, or maybe Washington, I don't know. And 2 days later, the United States Attorney said, wow. He said, do you have clout with the GSA? He said, it must have been just hours after my call. He said, they came in and took down the doors. The only thing is, they're not going to replace them. So now, not only can they see who's there, they can hear what's there. So that was my clout with the GSA.
Until Justice Kennedy just told me that story yesterday, I didn't realize that I was a party to the second half of that story. I was appointed U.S. Attorney in 1980. And when I walked into the office on my first day on the job, there were some workers there. And I said, oh, what are these workers doing? Oh, there were glass doors here, and we're replacing the glass doors with some wooden doors. Same story. So I said, oh, well, okay, where's the wooden doors? Well, they're not here yet. All right. They put up some, like, painter's cloths up there. And you had to walk in through these painter's cloths. I was in the United States Attorney's Office for 19 months. They never were replaced until, this is true, the last day I was leaving. They were up there putting in the doors. And one of my assistants, we had a party that day for me going away, and she presented me with this little plaque. And it said, the Bill Shub Memorial Doors. And as a joke, they put the plaque on the inside over the doors, Bill Shub Memorial Doors, because I had spent the whole time in the office walking through this tarp. The aftermath
You're welcome, Bill. But I was appointed. There was no circuit judge chambers here, and so the GSA showed me the space they had, and it was at that building, but there were no windows. And I said, part of my oath is that I have to spend time looking out the window. And so nothing much was happening. So George McCune was a former client of mine. He was a builder here. And he was moving out of a very beautiful office at 550 Capitol Mall, right almost across the street from the courthouse, not quite across the street from the courthouse on the Capitol Mall. So the GSA took those offices, and they were simply beautiful offices with very special bookcases, and it looked on the whole side of down the Capitol Mall, and I could see the Capitol building on one side, Tower Bridge on the other. And it was simply a superb office, and I would go over to the district judge's dining room to see the district judges where I was welcome. But these were I had quite a beautiful office, and I still miss it. Capitol one time, it can be
You
very.
do have a nice office now, you know.
But the GSA, when they, I spent the first 3 months in San Francisco, and it was the summertime. We rented a house in Tiburon for the kids, and so that I could meet my new colleagues and see the headquarters of the Ninth Circuit. So finally, I told the GSA, I said, "Is the office ready?" And they said, "It's all ready." And we had picked out furniture and so forth, and I went in there, and they had 13 wastebaskets and a flag, and I might sum up the job. I don't know.
Our Sacramento court actually in 1999 moved to the Robert T. Matsui Courthouse where we sit today. And in 2005, Fresno moved to its new courthouse named after Judge Coyle. Judge Coyle was instrumental in developing and designing both of those buildings, and he was known for saying that we shape our buildings and then our buildings shape us. Judge Shub, you were the chief judge when the court moved to this courthouse. How did we end up here on 501 I Street?
Well, first, I was the chief judge, but Bob Coyle gets all the credit
Right.
for this building. When David Levy and I were informed that we were going to be appointed, Judge Carlton took us out to lunch one day, and he said, "We have a problem." He said, "We've run out of space in our building at 650 Capitol Mall, and what they're going to do is add on to the building. And we will be in the courthouse while they're doing this construction. The new wing of this courthouse is going to be in what's now the parking lot. And we'll be in there for several years while they do this construction. And then when it's completed, it's really going to be kind of thrown together, as the old courthouse and the new courthouse together. What do you think about this idea?" He said, "For just a little bit more, we could have a whole new courthouse. Would you be in favor of that?" I think Judge Levy and I thought that was a no-brainer, and we said we would certainly favor a new courthouse. So Judge Coyle entered into negotiations with the city to find a location for a courthouse. He had some tentative plans, and he went to the city and he said, "We'd really like to put it downtown, but we really can't afford the kind of money you're talking about for this real estate. We have an option to go out in the county somewhere." And I don't know that he even knew what he was talking about, because I don't think there was any other option. But the city really wanted this courthouse downtown. So they had some discussions, and they sold him this lot for this courthouse for $1. And that's how we got here.
And the Judge Coyle talked with me, and we talked about what it would be the comparative cost to add on the building plus the inconvenience of having it gone on, and he was able to show, and he took a lot of time on it, that there would be very little cost differential, and to his credit, they really needed a courthouse in Fresno, even worse, but he wanted this one first. He did a terrific job.
Judge Coyle had reflected, Justice Kennedy, that when you were a part of the opening ceremonies at the Fresno courthouse, it was one of the best highlights of his career. Do you remember that day?
Well, I remember, of course, the judge, and remember going to Fresno and seeing that magnificent courthouses, and remember, courthouses are designed to show that there must be respect for the law, and that the law lasts, and that the law has dignity, and that the law endures. And this courthouse and the courthouse in Fresno reflect that, as it reflects the temperament and character of not only Judge Coyle, but all of the judges of this splendid district that you have.
Moving away from the courthouses, the Federal Defender's Office did not exist when this district was formed. But in 1963, the Supreme Court decided Gideon versus Wainwright, guaranteeing legal defense counsel to indigent defendants. There was no office, though. How do you evaluate how that's progressed, Justice Kennedy, from the Gideon decision to providing counsel for indigent defendants?
Well, of course, Gideon was one of the seminal cases, and again, it makes us realize the tremendous power that the law has over an individual who's accused of crime. And Gideon is one of the great cases in the history of our court. Not many people realize that the federal budget, for some reason, my task is to present the budget to the Congress. I've been doing it for 20 years. It's just our court, and Julia Gibbons does the budget for the rest of the courts, but I assist her and I testify as well. The budget for the federal courts is 0.01% of the budget of the United States, 0.01%. And not many people realize that this includes the cost of public defenders and probation officers. So the cost of public defenders is a very substantial part of the budget, but necessary under the Constitution.
Judge Hebb, what did the district do before it had a federal defender's office in 1971 to enforce that right?
Yeah, think about this. In my time, before Gideon, if you couldn't afford counsel, you didn't get one. Gideon came around, and this court had to deal with it. They had to decide how to get somebody, an attorney, that couldn't afford counsel. And we all know what a high percentage of those persons charged with crimes cannot afford counsel. So they didn't really have a lot of guidance as to how to do this, and they didn't have the money to pay these lawyers. So Judge Halbert and Judge McBride would get a hold of the phone book, and they'd open it up to the attorneys section in the yellow pages, and they'd just go down the list of attorneys. Somebody would say they didn't have an attorney. Would you like the court to appoint one for you? Yes. Next attorney. It may be a bankruptcy lawyer. It may be a probate lawyer. You didn't know. And so we would, in the U.S. Attorney's Office, get to see a cross-section of the bar coming in. And is Doris still here? One of them was Bob Matsui. And remember she said he just started practicing in 1966? He was a brand new lawyer. And he came in, and I had the privilege at that time of showing him around the federal courthouse. Well, after a while, certain lawyers kept coming back because they felt more comfortable in the court, and others would respectfully decline, saying they really didn't think they can handle it. So we got to see a more select group of lawyers. But it was a privilege to get to work with all those different lawyers in the community. That's how I got to meet the lawyers. And I don't know, maybe you even came in on one of those.
Well, if you had a law in motion, they say your motion, the motion is granted, Mr. Kennedy, and please remain till the 10 o'clock session, and you got your assignment for the criminal.
That could happen. And then, so eventually, we got a federal defender, and it was Dick Walker. Dick came around to us in the U.S. Attorney's Office, and he said, I'm going to be the loyal opposition. He said, I have my job, you have your job, I have my clients to represent. I'm going to represent my clients as vigorously as I can, but you can trust me. I'm not going to tell you anything that isn't true. I'm not going to mislead you in any way. I want to have this working relationship with the U.S. Attorney's Office. We were reluctant at the beginning. You know, this was somebody that was coming in messing up the apple cart a little bit. We had a good thing going here with these new lawyers coming in here and educating them on the law. And here was somebody that knew what he was talking about. And it took us a while to develop that trust with the Federal Defender's Office, but we did. We did. And then others came to work for him, Cliff Tedman and a number of others, and they had that same relationship with the U.S. Attorney's Office. I credit Dick Walker with having set that example that I think probably persists to this day, so that the relationship between the Federal Defender's Office and the United States Attorney's Office shows his input into it.
And they would send very good lawyers to the Court of Appeals and do a very good job in the Court of Appeals.
As we begin to close, are there any final thoughts or memories that either of you would like to share?
When I was hearing from my family about Judge Welch and knew Judge Lemon and Judge Halbert and the other judge we met, Judge McBride and Judge Wilkins, I had such respect for the dignity and the commitment and the integrity and the stature of the federal bench that you don't know. when you're young, you don't know who your role models are. But then you look back and say, oh, that was a role model. That was a role model. And as judges, we have the opportunity. We have the obligation to inspire young attorneys, and I thank all of my colleagues on the bench for carrying on that tradition. Thank you very much.
I don't know, two things come to mind when I think about how the district has changed in the last 50 years. One of them is technology. When you look at the caseload that our judges had back then, I think Judge Halbert probably had 100 or less cases. We now have 1,000 per judge. And the technology has, in many ways, enabled us to deal with that. And you just look back at the way we didn't know what the internet was. We didn't have email. If we wanted to communicate with Fresno, we had to pick up the phone. If we wanted to send them any documents, it had to be by the U.S. mail. And you think about all the changes gradually having been made, things that we didn't even think were going to happen or could happen, have happened. That's probably the biggest change that I perceived in this court over the last 50 years. And the other thing that comes to mind is that we talk about the judges. Every judge that we mention, when we talk about them, I don't think about, when I hear Bob Matsui, I don't think of the courthouse. I think of Bob Matsui. And when we talk about Judge McBride, Judge Halbert, Judge Wilkins, I think of the men. And each one of these judges, each one of the people that have worked with or for this court have influenced it in some way, and we've shaped it. And that's what's given the Eastern District of California its character today.
It is our hope that these conversations and sharing stories and memories can continue downstairs in the reception. And on behalf of the Eastern District Historical Society and the Sacramento chapter of the Federal Bar Association and all of the guests and judges here today, Justice Kennedy and Judge Hebb, thank you for coming. Please join us downstairs in the Anthony M. Kennedy Library and Learning Center on the first floor, and we look forward to seeing you there. Thank you.
Thank you very much.